Good morning. I have a memory. Let's see. I think I was 3 years old, and at the age of three, looking out the window, and my junior Troyer. This was in Bronson, Michigan. Junior Troyer had come with his little brown Chevy pickup to pick up my dad to take him to work. I think they were cutting firewood or something. It was wintertime. There was snow on the ground, and I remember my as they were leaving the driveway. This is my 3-year-old memory, right? I was watching them drive. Dad hops in the truck with his thermos and his lunchbox, and they start driving out the driveway. And suddenly the truck kind of slows down, then it stops, and it starts spinning in the snow. And as I'm looking out the window, suddenly my dad hops out of the front because he's on the passenger side. He runs around to the back, and he pushes Junior Troyer's truck, and the truck takes off and goes up on the road, and then it stops up there, and my dad runs up, hops it back in, and they take off and go to work. The truck had lost traction. With a little bit of push, it regained traction. That's a memory from my 3-year-old childhood. So today, I want to talk about traction and what it means in life if we lose traction, and how do we get it again. Now, as usual, I'm here to chat between 20 and 30 minutes, and I am not expecting to give you all the answers. What I am going to tell you about is a few things that happened to me back, say, it was about 11 years ago, 2009, 2010. It was right at the time when the Thorn Crown, this is a new mug of mine, by the way. I had a few Thorn Crown project mugs made up just to see what they would look like. And so this is one of them. This was a white mug with just the simple Thorn Crown project logo on it. But in 2009, it was when the idea of the Thorn Crown first came to me. And at the time, as I was working through, I was in ministry, traveling, I was speaking in churches. I was also, buying a home and doing other things. And I was trying to figure out my life. And I had several issues that I was really dealing with, because that year when the concept of the Thorn Crown came to me, I was reading in Philippians, and I was just seeing this thing that I'm supposed to take on the mind of Christ. And so to take on the mind of Christ, like what I started realizing was that if I am to be like Christ, then I need to humble myself like Christ did. And he came, he took on the form of a man, the form of a servant. He dwelt among us. He was willing to suffer, to live. And all of this was beginning to sink into my head, is that if I was going to follow the master, as he said, the servant is not greater than the master. And I had kept hoping, and this is a bit embarrassing, but I kept hoping that the church, talking about everybody out there, would step up and would provide for me, because I had the good intentions of being in ministry. Now, I had done the math. I had figured out that if I was going to be doing a gospel chalk art presentations, I was going to have a minimum of like 170 something meetings every year in order for the offering to be enough to cover for all of my expenses. That was based on the size of the offerings I was getting, from the time I was 19, 20, all the way up to now. In 2009, I was 29, and I was working on figuring this out. And so I kept having this feeling of entitlement, and it would turn into frustration. Why isn't the church, one, giving me enough bookings so I can have 175 meetings? It wasn't exactly 175. It was like right around there somewhere. And why can't the offering, I just need to be supported in this. And the Lord was working on me, asking me questions and working through me with other things. But the reality was, I just had gotten tired. Imagine this. In my mid-20s, I had gotten tired of life work. I just was tired of working. Tired of, as they say, working for the man. Going in, starting at 8 in the morning, clocking out at 5 at night, or whatever. I had different jobs that were, some of them were 7 in the morning. One of them was more like 2:30 or somewhere between 2:30 and 4 in the morning. I'd start my day's work and I'd be home by 5 that night. And so I was tired, and I had good intentions, and I wanted to serve God, and I was doing gospel chalk art, and that's what I wanted to do. And why couldn't I get just enough, income? And I had opportunities to work, construction, all kinds of things, but I was tired of doing that. And what's funny about it now is when I look back and I remember that time, I really just had lost a lot of traction. I had some debt that had been piling up that I just wasn't making any ability to pay off. I had a lot of things going on. And it just felt like the cloud above me was getting heavier and heavier, and the frustration was becoming more and more. And so that year, I was getting ready for a young men's retreat that I was leading. And then I was going on a camping trip with a bunch of my buddies out to, I think that was the year we went out to Big Bend. Anyway, we were having a lot of conversations. And in the process of it all, God started talking to me through Philippians and this idea of taking on the form of a servant, becoming like Christ. And I dubbed the concept becoming a thorn crown man. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the concept. I didn't like what was happening. I remember that whole year, different thing. Like, I read Eric Ludy's Bravehearted Gospel that year, and he was talking about how we needed to, get a spiritual backbone and stand up and be willing to live for the gospel, for Christ. And I honestly, as I assessed myself, I kept thinking, but I thought, what about that verse where it says that he would supply all my need in Christ Jesus? What about that verse? So I had these questions and these conversations with God. And so in the middle of all this, there's several more stories I'm going to be telling you today. I remember slowly coming to the realization that God was giving me something, but he was expecting something from me. And that I needed to use the gifts that he'd given me. And the concept of the talents, where he gives talents to these people, and a talent is, I guess, quite a chunk of money if you were to translate it to today's money. And to have someone give that to you, and then to don't just bury it, but do something with it. And I always was like, well, I would do this and I would do that. And so I remember even then I made a list and say, well, if someone gave me $100,000, then here's how I would break it down. And I'd make out my list of everything I was planning on doing with that $100,000. And the realization hit me somewhere along this time is that I wasn't even doing great with the money I had. Why would someone give me money? And it was annoying. But there was little punctures of logic coming into my very comfortable, fuzzy entitlement mindset that I was having. And so I was trying to build out of that. I remember 2008 getting a job that it was hard physical labor and not enough pay. And I wanted to quit, but I was like, no, I'm not going to quit until I have another plan, because I want to make sure that I do something. And so that job was one of those first, if you've ever seen, like at the truck I described at the beginning, when here's the little pickup, it's trying to take off and it spins out and it needs traction. And so what we do now is we either put chains on it, we throw dirt underneath it, or someone comes along and gives it a little push. And so here's the thing. If someone gives it a little push, like my dad gave Junior Troyer's pickup a little push, he then expects the truck to get to a spot where it can get traction of itself, and then he actually hopped in and rode with the truck. Had he pushed it a little bit, and the truck would have spun out again, and he would have had to push it again, and the truck would have spun out again, and he had to push it again. At some point, my dad would have said, look, this isn't worth it. Why don't you just come in by the fire? We'll wait till tomorrow, or you got to get new tires, or something's got to change, because your truck doesn't have traction. At least I think they would have said that. But what I was doing in this mid-20s time was every time someone gave me a little push, when the gift came in, I'd be like, oh, that was awesome. Can you push some more? And I wasn't getting traction. And I wasn't allowing the life circumstances to inform me that I needed to do something different. I mean, I was, but I was really, really slow at realizing. I just was very slow at it, right? And so I was trying to gain traction. That's what I was trying to do. And it was a long process from the time, I think it was 2006. I was having a realization in 2006 that I really didn't like to work and that I was entitled. But 4 years later, I was still working through that. 2011 is when it seemed that I was finally cresting and had gotten enough traction that it was really showing. 2010, I was making good progress, but I wasn't sure if I was going to make the top yet. 2011, by the way, is the year that I got married to Stacy. And so there I was, and I remember 2008, I was out in El Paso going with Jack Jarvis at Bearing Precious Seed. There was Brother Hector was there. Jack Jarvis was there. Just a great group of people, and I was going with them. I was doing the gospel chalk art going into Mexico. It was a great time. I remember that, and I remember in those times when we were down in between meetings, we'd be sitting down by the bus or in the church, and sometimes we were in a group where we were chatting with someone from the churches there in Mexico, but sometimes it was just me and the guys from Bearing Precious Seed. And I remember having conversations with them, and they genuinely cared about me, and they wanted to know where I was headed in life and what was happening. And I just remember being prayed for by these guys. I remember hearing some of their stories, and I just remember the good-natured ribbing that happened back and forth. And I really was hoping, coming out of there, that was beginning to me of a little bit of traction. I was making some headway. Let's see if I can find a picture here of me at Bearing Precious Seed in El Paso that time. Well, here, this is kind of a funny one. This is me on my way there. I was driving, so you got to get a good look of this guy. So this is me. I didn't have a beard at the time. I'm 28 years old. I don't know if you can see this. I'm driving a Buick Century. Got all kinds of stuff in the back seat. It was not my dream car, but it was the car that I had. Let's see. Here is me doing a chalk drawing. Oh, that's a devotional chalk drawing there, but there was here. This is maybe more like, that's a very blurry picture. This was us outside. Here I'm getting ready for the chalk drawing. That's me actually doing a chalk drawing. Wow, that's quite dark. Here's during the day. This is Brother Hector's preaching, and this is one of the pastors there. Anyway, so here's there's Jack Jarvis. I just remember this whole time of being there, and it was a time for me where I was beginning to get a little bit of traction. And so as I'm getting traction, and as I'm growing, and as I'm learning more about being willing to be a servant, because that was the thorn crown thing. I need to humble myself, take on the form of a servant, and serve. And I was learning these lessons through, because one of the things, as I was realizing I didn't have traction, one of the things I remember learning was, Joseph, work is good. God gave work to man in the garden before the curse came. Work is a good thing. God put us here to work, and it's a good thing. And that was a hard lesson. Then, and I don't know that I've ever fully learned it. I remember another thing that I was learning those years was just I was so proud. And I needed to humble myself. I was so proud. And sometimes I remember this kind of realization one time that I was having this horrible issue in which I was feeling so, I had such pride, and yet I felt so inferior. And I was like, what am I proud of? I feel inferior. Why am I acting proud? And so just the learning how to try to humble myself before God. And I remember, Little Bear Wheeler had a message where he talked about humbling yourself before the mighty hand of God, and in due season he would lift you up from Peter, that passage. And I remember listening to that during this time and going, I need to humble myself before the mighty hand of God. So those were two things I was having to learn. And then just, going back to diligence, I just needed diligence in my life to actively pursue what God had called me to do. And by 2010, I remember being in a phone call conversation with Jack Jarvis, and by this time I was paying my bills a little bit better than I had been back in 2008. Things were looking up. I was gaining some traction. And I'd been doing some painting, and I remember headed out there, according to the the timestamp here. It's this picture right here was something I painted in July of 2010. Let's see where, there we go. So this picture was July of 2010. And what was going on here is that I had an opportunity to do this picture. I've been painting some baptistries and stuff, and so Jack Jarvis I called him, and he said, well, we're having a problem because from starting in 2008 on, for a while the drug cartels were so bad in El Paso that a lot of the churches didn't feel comfortable sending their people into Mexico. They were like, no, we can't do this. And so I remember having a conversation with Jack Jarvis, and one of the things he said, it was one of those things that rang true on a deep level and has kept coming back to me over and over and has changed the way I talk about certain things. But he said this, he said the hardest thing for him is that he has churches who have, for the last 5 years or 10 years, sometimes a long time, have said, oh, we are called as a church to reach Mexico. And then when the cartels showed up on the border and suddenly there were some guns visible and there was maybe, maybe God didn't call us to Mexico specifically. Maybe we're supposed to go to the inner city over here or go do this in our neighborhood or something else. And Jack Jarvis at the time just said, look, if God has called you to Mexico, God has called you to Mexico. And if he's called you to go, he'll go with you. He'll protect you. He's a good God that gives good gifts to his children. I heard him say that so many times. And it struck deep into me. If I'm saying God has called me to do this thing, and it took me back to another conversation I had over lunch one time with Paul Swee there in Austin, Texas. And he was a businessman, Christian. I love this guy. He was a homeschool dad. Anyway, he was talking to me one time, and he just looked at me honestly and was looking at me at a time when I needed this question. He said, Joseph, if you believe God has called you to do this, are you still willing to go even if you have to pay your own way? And I thought, well, yes, I am willing to go, even if I had to. But why would I have to pay my own way? Shouldn't the church pay my way? But it was a good question, and it kept coming back to me at different times. And so when I was down there in Mexico, or in El Paso, and we're getting ready to go into Mexico, I kept thinking, what has God called me to? And if God has called me to do that, am I willing to finance my own way in it? That means that when I'm out on a trip, that's awesome. But when I come home, I need to take jobs digging post holes, building fence, building houses, doing construction. Whatever I can do with my hands, I need to do to be able to provide for what God has called me to do. And I didn't like that. But it was refreshing because there were several times in this whole process where I had lost traction and the debts were piling up. And it got to the point where my electricity was cut off and things like that had happened. And I just remember going through it. It was so humiliating and so hard. And yet it had happened. And it was partly because I had lost traction and hadn't taken the time to figure out what it would take to regain traction. So I remember several things that helped me regain traction. One of them had happened earlier in my life, and it just kept coming back to me. But we have that song we sing, "It Is Well With My Soul." Well, there is the Bible verse from Ephesians 5:1 and from the Old Testament where it says, honor your father and mother, that it may be well with you, and that you may live long on the earth. Well, when I was 22, I heard a message where someone had taken that, and they had just turned it into a question, is it well with you? And so ever since then, every time that someone would sing, "It is well with my soul," I would say, well, is it well with my soul? And so there were times, when your electricity is being cut off, when you're not being able to pay the rent, when you're not being able to do things like that, if you're honest, you have to say, it is not well with me. And so if it's not well with me, then what's wrong? And I remember reading Psalm 1. I memorized this one. I've used it. I've talked about it a lot of times on here. Psalm 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and his law doth he meditate day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does will prosper. And I remember quoting that and thinking, is it well with me? Is whatever I'm doing prospering? Am I blessed in that way? Hey, William. Hey, Buckaroo. Want to say hi to everybody? Hi. Do you need a sip of coffee? Is that why you came?
It's not hot.
It's not hot? Yeah, it's French roast. It's dark, though.
Yeah.
So, I remember turning those into a question, and it was very helpful to gain traction. Because in turning over the question of, is it well with me? Am I blessed? Am I prospering? My honest answer was no, I'm not. I'm not doing well at all. And I need to do something different. So I remember back in 2007 or 2008, I think it was 2008, I sat down and I finally went and collected all the debts that were growing, things that I couldn't keep up with, and I wrote them all down, and it was less than $5,000 that I was behind on. And I had felt like I was becoming it was an insurmountable number. Now, $5,000 was a lot for me in 2008. But it was, hey dude, don't glug it all down. But it was not as bad as I had thought it was. And I finally knew how much it was and where it was, and then I had figured out, I had done some more math, and I figured, okay, so if these are all my debts, and if I was to pay minimum payments everywhere and was going to do all of this stuff, how much would I have to make every single day, just to get an idea? And it was something like less than $30 a day that I had to make the whole month in order to pay all my debts. And so I was like, well, maybe I can do this. Because if I can have a day where I earn more than $30 or twice or three times, then that would give me one day that would be free from ministry, right? And so I began thinking differently, and it started, my expenses divided by the days for the month, even paying off the debt, it became manageable. Instead of being this big black cloud that was just impossible, suddenly I was like, oh, I can do this, and I should do it. If I'm walking with God, and if I love Him, then I should be doing this, and I should be able to say, yes, being diligent, as the Bible talks about, working hard, as the Bible talks about, being honest, as the Bible talks about, all of these things that should be part of my life as a Christian. This should result, according to Psalm 1 and some others, that I should be walking in blessing. And if I'm not walking in blessing, instead of railing at the church and saying, why aren't you blessing me? I should be talking to God, who is the true source of all blessing, and saying, what do you have for me? And I remember that was the beginning, right? But it was a long grind, and I had to over and over again learn different parts of the lesson. So back out in 2010, that summer, I remember going out, and Jack Jarvis was saying how a lot of people were afraid to go into Mexico because of everything that was happening. And so we were on the phone talking, and I had just been really, really blessed by this verse from Isaiah 41. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. And that was just, it was such a powerful thing. And so he was saying he would like a mural. And he said he has this big space. And I thought, I would love to put this verse. And I don't remember which of us said it first. But I remember thinking, this is the verse I'd like to paint. And he asked me to paint this verse because it was one of the verses that was powerful that he loved. God had been using it to minister to him. So I remember going out there, we buy the paints and everything, and I paint this whole thing. However, on my way out there, as I'm praying and going, I'm sensing that I'm beginning to gain traction and go where God wants me to be. And it's exciting, but I'm not I don't have all the traction I need. And we arrive out there, and whenever I do a mural that's that size, when it's up on the wall and stuff, I usually would design something, and then I would project it up on the wall and sketch it up there. And so I would use my computer to design things, and then I'd get it up there. Well, I just remember I got this all designed and ready. I was so excited. I printed out a version of it. I took it to Jack's office. I said, what do you think about this? He was like, that is awesome. Let's do this. And about that time, my computer died completely. It just died completely. And I was left there with the sound of the swamp cooler going. I was in my little bedroom there, and I was just crying out to the Lord, what is going on here? Why is this happening to me? I'm trying to gain traction. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to do all this stuff. And now my computer is broken. And so in the middle of that, I can almost feel the atmosphere of that room. Hot July day in El Paso, swamp cooler going. And all I have is this little thing that I had printed up, but it's not good enough. And I'm just thinking, I've got to do something better. And so I'm praying, because I can't project. I just didn't know how I was going to do this because my hand lettering, while it was getting better, was not as good as that. I needed to be able to get my hand lettering up on the wall with a projector after I had arranged it all right. So I finally remember saying, well, if I can't use my computer and I don't have the money to go buy another one, rather than ask someone to buy me a computer, I need to go find out who else has a computer. My sister was on the same trip, Rosemary. So I borrowed her computer. She had a computer with her. And I was able to, she didn't have the same program that I had used to make it, but I was able to get other programs off the internet and stuff, and I was able to recreate the thing, project it up there, painted it all that whole time. And I just remember being really, it was really cool that I got to paint this verse up there about not fearing. But underneath, I was like, Lord, you're showing me something else. You're teaching me something else. And I was feeling so humbled, and so I was choosing to humble myself. Lord, I want to walk humbly before you. I want to walk in humility. And my computer broke, and I couldn't even replace it. I couldn't even buy another computer. I didn't have the $500 it took to do that. And I'm like, I'm 30 years old. I ought to be able to buy a computer. I can't even buy a computer. This is horrible. This is a lack of traction. And so, but I was like, but Lord, I am making payments. I am paying my housing. I am paying down my debt. I am making progress. I'm getting traction. So as I was going to sleep those evenings, I remember quoting this verse from Isaiah, but I was also saying, blessed is the man. And it would just turn into a question, am I a blessed man? Because if I'm not, I want to change that. I want to walk where God wants me to be. And I came back from that trip, and on Sunday morning, I was at Living Water Fellowship there in Bulverde, and as I was there, they asked me for an update, so I shared everything that happened, including the fact that the computer broke, and I'd lost my computer, and that I was now, but that I was able to use someone else's computer for that to finish the design and get it done, but that I had gotten it done, and I just, I shared everything, got it done. I was excited about it. But I did share that my computer had broken. Well, then I was leaving from there to go out to Camp Winchester to do the boys program, and I had gotten, this was one of those times when I really was ready. The week before I'd gone out to El Paso, I had gotten the program all ready. I had gotten everything set up. Well, now my computer was broken, and I didn't have what I needed. The whole program was on there. And so I was thinking, what am I going to do today? How am I going to, because Sunday afternoon, that evening, is when all the campers were going to come in. So I was leaving from church, and I was headed over to Camp Winchester. How am I going to get all this stuff? And again, I just was, Lord, I need to pray. So I was praying, and I was leaving church after the fellowship meal and was getting it out on I-35 when I got a call from one of the pastors, and he said, go to the nearest Best Buy, look at the computers that are there, and see if you can find something for around $500, and I will pay for it. So I took the exit, and I went down to Best Buy, and I went in there, and I found a computer, and he called in, and he paid for it. And I went over to Camp Winchester, and I had my little hard drive with me from the old one, so I was able to just transfer things over. I drove in, unpacked a brand new computer, plugged it in, charged it, transferred files over, printed out all my programs for all the staff and the schedule for the week, as if I had planned it all along that way. And it just worked. And that whole week, I would look over, and it was, I don't have a good picture of this laptop, but I have a picture of me using it a month later. Here we go. So this is me, and you can't really tell, but the back right here, this is green. And so this green Dell laptop was to me a picture, and this is me. You see how I don't have a beard or anything? I didn't really, this is maybe one of those manly secrets, I didn't really gain traction in life until I got a beard. But I used that computer. It was perfect timing. Later, I used that same laptop. Here is one of my favorite pictures of me with that laptop. This was when I was writing the script for Indescribable. So I was, Stacy took a picture of me. I was working on the script that time. And so this whole story for me was over the years, many, many people saw that I didn't have traction, gave me that little push. And sometimes I'm sorry to say, I didn't make full use of the traction they gave me. And I would just keep spinning out and keep spinning out. And some people I know said, well, I'm not going to give any more to Joseph because he keeps spinning out. He doesn't have traction. And then there was this day. And I'm so grateful for that pastor who was willing to give me one more push and say, maybe he needs this. He said, you're going to camp, you're the camp director, the program director. Do you need a computer? I was like, well, yes. I've been trying to figure this out this whole weekend, how I'm going to get this. He said, go to Best Buy. I'll buy you a machine. And he did. And that machine was a push. And again, it was so humbling for me at the time. See, if someone would have bought me a computer 2 or 3 years earlier, I would have been like, well, bless God. That's what they ought to have done. The church owes me this. And I have good intentions, and I'm going out to do ministry, so I'm really grateful for this. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, person. You did the right thing. But on that day, I just remember driving the rest of the way out to Camp Winchester, and there was something going on in my heart that I didn't understand. But it was finally, and I wasn't done being humbled, but I was humbling myself more and more, and I was more and more in the position of having that, taking on the form of a servant, being a thorn-crowned man, but I was gaining traction. And that was one of the pushes that I needed to keep things going. And since then, I've had a lot of people give us that little boost. But it has come at a time when we've been working hard, and it's very humbling, but I'm so grateful for the times when people give us that boost, when they look at the direction we're going, they see the hill we're climbing, they see the vehicle we're using, they need just a little bit of help. And so now, I would like to be aware of what is happening in the lives of people around me, to be able to give them those little bits of boosts. And it may not be financial, it may be something else, an encouraging word. But if you've lost traction, don't give up hope. Humble yourself before the mighty hand of God, and in due season he will lift you up. But it requires us to humble ourselves, to admit that we've lost traction, to start working on it, to write down on paper what the problems are, to seek the Lord, and then to obey in every area that we know how to. And potentially we have to go back and confess and ask forgiveness of people that we've hurt in the process. Maybe people have been trying to help us and we've ignored it, and we've misused the little push, and we just sat in there yelling out the window, push some more, you're doing good. Maybe we've done that instead of saying, all right, let's figure out why I don't have traction and let's get going. May the Lord bless you, and may you truly be well with your soul. And I will see you next week. Blessings.